Hello everyone and welcome back to the Odds Now YouTube channel for what is a first for this channel actually. We're discussing a new sport that we've not covered on the channel before. You've probably guessed by the title anyway. But this video is all about the 2025 World Snooker Championship, which gets underway, I think I'm right in saying, is it this weekend, Adam?
Yep, this Saturday 10 a.m.
Yes, so what it is, we're kind of in the midst of the final qualifiers at the moment, and we were umming and ahhing about when to film this video, so we decided to break it down into two, really. So today, as you can see, I'm joined by Adam Drury, who you may recognise the name from oddsnow.com, hopefully, and he's our resident football columnist, but he also is a big snooker fan, and he's going to be our World Championship man throughout the Crucible Marathon. So Adam, I guess, first of all, start by telling us a little bit about your love for snooker.
Yeah, I mean, love for snooker really does stem from the World Snooker Championship, which I was a massive nerd about from probably an embarrassingly young age. I remember like 5 or 6 being excited to watch this thing, which came on the BBC once a year. Always just obsessed with watching it, like coming home from school, catching up. And yeah, it's just become two of my favorite weeks of the sporting year, really. Love the drama of it, like the history of it, the feeling of it while it's on, the evolving storylines, and also how different, and this is something we'll come on to in terms of tipping as well, how different the tournament is to the rest of the snooker calendar, which when you start to follow throughout the rest of the year, as I did as I sort of got a little bit older, it's such a different tournament, like a different beast to everything else that snooker players have to deal with, and the emotional roller coaster they have to go through, the mental, physical roller coaster they have to go through to win it. So yeah, it's a really interesting sort of interesting thing to have to battle as a sportsman, I think, and that's what makes it such a fascinating tournament.
Yeah, definitely think you could describe it as one of the toughest mental tests in sport. I think, as I said, 17 days is a grueling test, and there's a lot of different things required to make a Crucible winner. Now, just to touch on what I was saying before there, so for anyone that's not around the year snooker fan, we're currently in the midst of the final qualifying matches at the moment. So players have had to go anywhere between 1 and 4 rounds of qualifying in order to try and reach the Crucible alongside the 16 seeded players. There'll be 16 qualifiers come through to make up the whole draw. And we've got a couple of them starting to come through already. And over the next couple of days, we're going to get our final lineup. When that final lineup is confirmed, what myself and Adam will do, we'll jump back on. We'll have a look at the actual draw. We'll look at some match betting, some quarter betting, and hopefully point you in the direction of a few winners or value losers at the very least as well, to make sure you can get some fun out of this tournament, however strong your passion for snooker is. But tonight, we're keeping it nice and generic. We're going to have a little look at where the seeds are sitting in the 2025 draw. But first, a little bit of chat just about the challenge that is winning at the Crucible. We've already kind of touched on it there. You said it's very unique in terms of the snooker calendar, but what would you say actually makes a Crucible winner? What are the key factors that we're looking for from a betting perspective when it comes to trying to find the winner of this? Because I was having a look through the previous winners earlier, and God, if you were trying to just isolate like a perfect age, there's everything from like, you know, late 20s to early 50s in the last decade alone.
Yeah, well, I guess having to last the pace is the most important thing. And I think there are players who probably haven't ever managed to win this tournament who have the ability to do it, but just can't keep turning up day after day after day, particularly on that final weekend where you play Thursday to Monday. So semi-finals are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, the final across Sunday and Monday. Near enough, I think, morning, afternoon and evening for 2 of the semi-final days, afternoon and evening for the final. It's really grueling, and mentally you've got to be there. And I guess you can achieve that in a few different ways. So if you're Ronnie O'Sullivan, you've got the ability as a snooker player to last the distance because you pop balls and it maybe doesn't get you down so quickly. And then other players are just incredibly mentally resilient. But it's probably that combination you need to find to win it. It's rare that you'll... So Luca Brissell was the champion 2 years ago, who didn't really have a reputation as someone who could... He was more of a freewheeling potter rather than someone who you'd say... could really concentrate and was disciplined and would come back session after session. So he just played amazingly in that fortnight. But generally over the last decade, players like Mark Selby, Kyren Wilson last season, and obviously Ronnie have been the players who can last the distance because they've got the ability, but also that concentration and mentality to come back again and again, which is why, and again, we'll come on to this, but players who have had big seasons up to now aren't necessarily the best bet to go on and win in Sheffield, because they've already taken so much out of themselves this year. Whereas when we come on to talking about who we fancy this year, personally, I favour players who maybe haven't actually had such a good season in terms of winning tournaments and going the distance, because there's still a little bit of energy in them, and they've got something more to give once they're in Sheffield.
Yeah, and you talk about Luca Brissell there, and I think when I was having a little look into sort of the trends and trying to find some angles in earlier, I found Brissell to be the big sort of trend booker. He just didn't really fit the mold at all, did he? But he was absolutely marvelous that year, and he's got that kind of maverick feel about it, hasn't he? That if he just turns up at any one time, he can do serious damage. But I think generally, yeah, you're looking at the names that turn up. It tends to be sort of cream rising to the top, if not necessarily the number one seed. In fact, almost never the number one seed. It tends to be real quality sort of match players who have that mentality and that strong will to win and balancing the rigors of the schedule as well. We've got to talk about the odds for this year. And as I say, we can't go too in depth until we know the full draw, because there's some very, very capable players coming through these qualifiers. We've already touched on the fact that they're ongoing right now. But one man who has already sealed his space is Xiao Xintong. And he's actually into 7th favourite in the outright market, despite not yet knowing what part of the draw he's going to sit into. So that is a perfect case in point as why we can't go too in depth with who's got the good draw, who hasn't. But we can take a little look at the draw. First, we'll take a little look at the betting. And as you can see, no surprises there. Judd Trump, who's had a fantastic season, does come in as the favourite. And I will just give a shout out to AK Bets here, who are currently top price on virtually every runner at the World Championship, with the caveat that they're only a third on each way place terms. So if you're looking for a big chunky each way bet, you may want to shop around. But fair play to them going so strong there with the outright prices. Judd Trump 4-1. Mark Selby is in their second favourite, 6-1. We've then got the reigning champion Kyren Wilson at 15-2. Ronnie O'Sullivan, the Maverick, I'm sure we're going to talk about in depth at some point as well, is 8-1. No certainty that he'll even turn up at this stage. Neil Robertson 14-1. John Higgins, who won last time out, 14-1. Xintong, as I mentioned, is in there at 18s. And then you can see the remainder going across your screens there at 18-1 and bigger, the likes of Sean Murphy, Mark Allen, et al. I mentioned there, Adam, the number one seed. It's not necessarily a good place to be, is it, at the World Snooker Championship? In recent years, we've not had a number one seed win for an awful long time. So is that a bad omen, in your opinion, for Kyren Wilson as he looks to defend it? He's also got the Crucible curse to try and overcome as well. We
should talk about the worst curse in sport, in my view, which is that the first time winner in Sheffield has never defended their title. Which strikes me as something that is very unlikely to ever happen. So I'm not really sure how it's a curse. It's just a thing. Which I'm not sure how often a first-time winner can be expected to defend their trophy. But there does seem to be a feeling that if anyone is going to break this curse and buck the trend of winning it for the first 2 times in their career in consecutive years, it could be him. He has, again, referring back to Brissell, who didn't really deal with the weight of expectation and that status as world champion particularly well, sort of enjoyed his next year without really cracking on in terms of becoming an established top player. Wilson's gone completely the opposite way, won multiple titles this season, and potentially crucially for this tournament, but certainly has been for his season, seems to have the beating of Judd Trump, and is the first player to potentially intimidate or worry Trump consistently for 5 or 6 years since Trump's rise to the best player in the world over the last few years. So Wilson's got that determination. You kind of feel like he fancies being the man who's going to achieve this for the first time. My only concern would be, as I mentioned earlier, just what a phenomenal season he's had. Has meant that he's played a lot of snooker, reached a lot of finals, gone the distance in lots of different tournaments. And it's a long season and a long fortnight to have to get through again. And there were actually signs that his form dipped a little bit at the Tour Championship last time out. Maybe that will suit him because he's had a longer break. So he's, for me, among those very top favourites, if you're talking Trump, Wilson, O'Sullivan, Robertson, maybe we'll come back to Selby, but I think Wilson is among the most my favourite of those top boys at the top of the market.
Okay, interesting. He might be able to be the man that finally cracks it then. We should mention Judd Trump, who you've referenced there, and Wilson having the better of their always entertaining exchanges in recent times. Trump still feels to me like the player that has the X factor. And when he's really on, is it fair to say that when he's at his absolute best, he is the man to beat, even with Ronnie potentially in the field?
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to Ronnie, but we just have no idea where Ronnie's at the moment. Yeah, I think Trump's still the one who you feel like when they're all at their best, he's the best, and he's got that air of invincibility, or has done over the last few years, certainly, where I think he believes every time he plays, he ought to win. He's interesting this year because in the last few years, I think he's run out of steam a little bit in Sheffield because of just how good he's been throughout the entire season. And not left himself anywhere further to go. Whereas this year, he's actually pulled out of a few events over the last few months, deliberately played less. And so it's that change in tack could work for him. But I also wonder whether it might, it could affect his rhythm in the opposite sense. I think the emergence of Wilson is the most interesting thing with Trump, and the Trump-Wilson rivalry has sort of defined this season. Probably the biggest rivalry in snooker, maybe since the kind of Selby O'Sullivan rivalry, which peaked probably 8, 9, 10 years ago. And I think Wilson might have just chipped away at Trump's that air of invincibility a little bit. I think Trump maybe looks more beatable now than he has done for a few years. And maybe not quite as confident as he has been. So personally, I think I'm happy to avoid him at that kind of 7-2, 4-1 price, just because I think, despite the fact I think he's had the most lucrative season ever in terms of prize money. A lot of that comes from an event in Saudi last year. My feeling is that he's not quite as invincible in his own mind as maybe he has been. And I mean, there is the potential for a Wilson-Trump final, which would be a sort of defining moment in this rivalry. And I'd probably fancy Wilson if they went head to head now.
Yeah, correct indeed. The 1 and 2 seed coming into this, which means Wilson is right at the top of the bracket and Trump is right at the bottom of the bracket. And I will just actually, for the benefit of the viewers, try and bring that bracket onto screen now. Now, it is a bit of a crude Wikipedia screenshot, so it's not anything glamorous, I'm afraid. But just to give you a little bit of an idea of where everybody lies in there, Kyren Wilson is in a quarter with Jack Jones, Neil Robertson and Mark Allen. Ronnie O'Sullivan, and we're about to come on to Ronnie just after this, is in with Zhang Anda, Si Xiaoyi and Mark Selby. And then in the bottom half, we have John Higgins, who's in with with Zhao Gudong, Barry Hawkins and Mark Williams. And then Luca Brissell, the champion of 2 years ago, is in a very intriguing quarter with Ding Junhui, Sean Murphy and Judd Trump. So, as I say, if you're wanting more of a deep dive on the actual tournament, how it might pan out and stuff, we're going to do that a little bit later in the week when the kind of bracket is confirmed and we have some match betting to go on. But for now, we'll keep it quite generic and we'll move on to that man who, even if you're not a snooker fan, I'm sure you know all about him, Ronnie O'Sullivan. He really has been the figurehead of the sport for decades now. But Ronnie, he comes into this tournament with far more question marks than answers. That feels like it's the case most years with his form and his temperament. And does he really want to win as much as he has previously done or whatever? But we have even bigger concerns over him now. He's been taking quite an extended break from snooker for his mental health. He's missed a lot of tournaments, pulled out of a lot of tournaments very late as well, which has irked a few people as well. But he's always been his own man, O'Sullivan, I suppose. And I doubt he's going to change now. But we're still, here we are, just a few days out. We're still not 100% sure if he's going to be playing. He said he'd leave it as late as possible, just to add to the drama. What's your take on Ronnie in the last few months? Because it has been a very turbulent time, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those situations that's difficult to comment on because there is a feeling that mentally, potentially his mental health has suffered. He has had issues in the past, so you don't really want to kind of get into speculation of what's going on too much. But I think you're right, certainly, that late pullouts have irritated a lot of people, particularly players who miss out on competitions, and then it's too late to get their space back in a tournament that he pulls out of. And that would happen again now this year if he pulls out of the World Championship before Saturday. Whoever he draws will get a bye, I think, rather than another qualifier coming in. So I'm sure that would irritate people. Yeah, he's got lots of other stuff going on. He does lots of exhibitions. I think now lives out in Saudi Arabia. So it feels like he's taking his career in a slightly different path. It's so difficult to know what to think, because actually, as you said, he quite often comes to Sheffield with more questions than answers. But a year ago was actually the most bullish that people were generally about his chances, because he'd already won the UK and the Masters that year and was going for all 3 majors in a season. Obviously didn't manage that. And then we think back to 2013 when he didn't play for an entire calendar year, won the World Championship 2012, didn't play for an entire calendar year, came back to Sheffield and won it again the following season, which is probably one of the most phenomenal achievements ever in the history of the tournament. So on that basis, having a long break running, coming into it doesn't really seem to make much of a difference to him. But I think now he's obviously 12 years older. I think the field is probably stronger in terms of the number of players who could win this tournament. I find it hard to believe he can come in cold, having not played. He hasn't played a professional match since the middle of January. I find it difficult to believe he can come in under those conditions and win this tournament. But the truth is, if we're looking for if we're trying to come up with logical explanations and reasons for backing players, I don't think we can reasonably back O'Sullivan at 3rd or 4th favourite. I mean, he's 5-1 second favourite with Bet365. I just don't think that there's enough there to be confident about that. So if he wins it, fair play. It will be absolutely phenomenal again. And obviously it'll be a record-breaking 8th title. But from a betting perspective, kind of happy just to leave it.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of sort of casual watchers of snooker who will look at that O'Sullivan price if he does line up and just think, wow, I'll have a bit of that. But I suppose the bookies may be just a little bit worried about liability issues if everybody piles into O'Sullivan at double figure prices and they get a little bit of a awkward situation. I mean, you could tell with Ronnie within a couple of matches if he fancies it or not. And like you say, quarterfinal exits in the last 2 years, actually, to Luca Brissell and to Stuart Bingham, games that you would expect him when fully on song to sort of find a way through. So just shows he is, you might have this idea in your head that O'Sullivan is just rock solid, but actually there's a lot of potential chinks in that armor there. The one man that we haven't mentioned of the 4 leading the betting so far is Mark Selby. I've put Granite Selby here because I just think he is just tailor-made for the Crucible, isn't he? Obviously a former champion and has irritated people with his playing style over the years, namely Ronnie. But while he isn't always aesthetically pleasing to watch for people who like exciting, adventurous snooker, he's certainly very, very effective on this stage. And it always takes a really good performance to get rid of him, doesn't it?
Yeah. And to be fair, accusation, stuff about his playing style, I don't necessarily agree. I think when he's at his best, he's fantastic to watch. Brilliant potter. Can really mix it in that side of the game as well. It's just that he's got the other side to tap into when he needs to. And probably his best attribute in this tournament is that he never goes on, since in the years he's won it, never seems to have a chuck in an absolute shocker of a session where you lose a match, where you lose 7-1, 8-0 in a session and there's no way back. Even if he plays poorly, he'll nick 2 or 3 frames from a session, which means that if he comes back in better mood, playing better in the next one, he's right in there. I think you see too many players who probably, particularly towards the end of the tournament, when they are becoming very tired and they've played a lot of snooker, basically begin to sort of, they can chuck in 3 or 4 in a row, which go completely wrong. And I think he's one of the best at not doing that. So that's probably the key to his success. I agree. Of the favourites, as I said earlier, I think he and Wilson would be my 2 favourite of the favourites. Just feels like he's really getting back towards the peak of his powers. Played well at the Tour Championship and lost in the final to Higgins. Both of them were sensational in that match, so we don't really need to read too much into that defeat, I don't think. And we know if he gets through the first couple of rounds, the longer the matches get, the more I'd probably fancy him to win them. So I think if he's not going to win it this year, potentially we're looking at a first, second round quarterfinal exit. So that could be something to look at in the match markets. But yeah, for sure, one of the absolute favourites and deservedly so.
Yeah, that's exactly how I read it with Selby as well. He's one of these players, if he's still there come the semis, like you're regretting not backing him, aren't you, at that point? 10-6 exit to Joe O'Connor last year in round 1, as we kind of suggest there. But I seem to recall him talking about potential retirement after that game when he wasn't.
Mentally, he was nowhere near it last year.
Wasn't in a good place at all. Yeah. Wasn't in a good place at all. And like you say, appears to be coming in really good form. And it's interesting that you touch on the Tour Championship there, the recent tournament, and John Higgins beat Mark Selby there. Bizarrely, since the Tour Championship was introduced in 2019, nobody who's won the Tour Championship has gone on to succeed at the World Championships, which is one of these sort of quirky stats. There are a lot of them, aren't they, floated around? And you sometimes wonder, is this just coincidence? Is this actually worth taking note of? But you've already kind of touched on it. And you say that you're not particularly worried about recent form when it comes into making selections here. Do you think that players can just turn it on here? If they've, I mean, is there a line where you're like, okay, he is playing rotten, like that does worry me? Or are you forgiving in all circumstances with that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I guess it's kind of, there's a certain kind of gut feeling that comes into it, because it's quite hard to point at a player and say, right, you're playing badly enough that I fancy you in Sheffield. It's not like that. But I think you've got to have something more to give and somewhere to go during the competition. And I think players who have peaked already this year and had heights, there are so many players capable of winning this competition that I almost think those who have had their moment already this season. And when you have your moment, you rely on lots of little things, like little bits of luck, little breaks of the ball, the opposition, the opponent missing, whatever it may be. And I think there's enough of them on a level enough playing field that variance almost kicks in, and those players who have peaked already might just struggle to do so again. And as I say, I think in terms of reserves of energy, it can be hard for players who have done really well already this season. And I just like that arc of someone who's had a decent enough year, maybe gone a little bit under the radar, but has somewhere to go in Sheffield. And it's long enough. It's a long enough tournament that you don't need to be coming here. If you come to Sheffield flying, there's long enough for that form to drop off. And if you come to Sheffield not flying, there's long enough within the tournament for you to find it. It's like 3 or 4 tournaments worth of matches and frames that you need to win potentially. So it doesn't worry me too much if someone's not. Listen, if someone's in an absolutely terrible way, probably like Selby last year, where I think it was kind of understood he probably wouldn't win it, that would be different. But there are 1 or 2 players I've looked at this year who haven't won many titles, but I think are playing well enough that they've got something more to give at this time of year.
So I just got myself muted there. We're going to come on to Adam's anti-post 2 picks, which have been published on oddsnow.com earlier this week. So make sure you do keep it with oddsnow.com throughout the tournament for Adam's regular betting tips throughout the Snooker World Championship. But before we talk about sort of the best of the rest, I do want to talk about Xintong. We touched on him at the start of the show. He's just qualified for this tournament. He doesn't know where he's going to sit in the draw, and he's already 7th favourite. Now, I watched Xintong live at the Barbican in York, playing that UK Championship final against Luca Brissell. And I must admit, when I got the tickets for the final well in advance, I was hoping to maybe see a Ronnie or a Judd Trump. And I got this final and thought, this could be a bit underwhelming. But actually, it was an absolute masterclass from Xintong, and I left it absolutely convinced I'd seen a future world champion. And he's since obviously been littered in controversy and scandal with the time away from the game, which is why he's lost his ranking points, which is why he's having to come through these qualifiers. But on the recent evidence, Adam, he hasn't lost that mercurial talent. Do you consider him a live chance this year?
Oh, that's so difficult to say. I mean, we should say he's just come back from a ban as part of the match fixing scandal 2 or 3 years ago. So he's one of the first players who got caught up in all of that. I think to come back, there are some of the players with longer bans who still aren't involved. So he's actually an amateur for this tournament. He's not even a professional at the moment, not got a ranking. So he really is a wild card. But yeah, you're right. In terms of ability, I mean, he is a complete joke. I've watched some of his qualifying games this week, and the speed he scores at as well. You look away for a couple of minutes, come back, and he's on 60, 65 and nearly wrap the frame up. I mean, it's incredible. Every time, it seems like these young Chinese players almost take it in turns to threaten to be the one who's absolutely going to break through at the very top. Got Si Wei, who reached the world semi-final a couple of years ago. Wu Yize, who's another one who might be worth keeping an eye on over the next few years in this competition, I think. But yeah, it does feel like Xintong is the man this time around. He's obviously, and the box he ticks is that he's got experience of winning a major tournament. As you say, he won the UK back in 2021. So 7th favourite almost feels like an overreaction to the storyline and the fact he's come back in and playing so well in qualifying. I don't know whether he's probably become too short to back now, just because his playing style is very open as well. And you wonder whether at some point that's going to catch up with him. And if he does have a bad session or two, I don't think his safety game is necessarily as good as some of the top guys, but he's going to be a lot of fun to watch, I'm sure, but maybe just fun to watch rather than fun to put your money on.
Yeah, he definitely is that wild card option, isn't he? But I think he's getting plenty short enough now, to be honest, for me at 16s. I think there's better value possibly out there. And that's kind of what we'll conclude this initial video on then. There's so many names I could list here. Most of them have been scrolling across your screens for the last 25 minutes or so. But we'll just call it best of the rest here. There is so much strength in depth in this field. So many players you can make a case for. I know you've made a case for two of them in your first written piece. Tell us a little bit about why and who the two players are that you've picked.
Yeah, so the first of the two players I picked, and probably the one I'd favour slightly more, though I like them both, is Mark Allen, who coming into this tournament last year was the fourth favourite, having won some big titles, won the Champion of Champions, won the Players' Championship in the months before the Worlds. And to be fair, didn't perform badly in Sheffield at all. He got knocked out by a ridiculous clearance from John Higgins in the second round. One of Higgins' sort of trademark clearances eliminated him, and it looked like he was going to get through to the quarterfinal and play Kyren Wilson. I think more importantly for this year, he ticks the boxes I've been looking for in terms of someone going under the radar who has the capacity to peak in Sheffield and the ability definitely in the game to win this tournament. He's talked this season about focusing on this event much more, which I suppose in some cases could send alarm bells ringing because you can almost overthink it. And I think he maybe has overthought it in the last few seasons in terms of technique. He's always fiddling and changing little bits and pieces. But actually, I think he's someone who, if he's going to be really dialed in, I think he's someone who can really come to the boil in the next fortnight. And it's about time really that he put a big run together in this tournament. I think he reached the semis in 21 and lost to Mark. Actually, no, it's more recent than that. The year Brissell won, so 23, he reached the semis. But it's more his attitude towards this competition that I'm kind of excited by. And he ticks those boxes in terms of someone who's done okay this season, reached the semis of the UK and the Masters. So certainly performing at major events. And just feel like it might be his time to kind of, come to the boil and peak over the next fortnight. In terms of the draw as well, he comes up against Neil Robertson in the last 16 if they were to both get through the first round. Don't think that's a bad draw. Robertson's someone who hasn't enjoyed this tournament.
Not got a good record, has he, Robertson, at the Crucible?
And then potentially against Kyren Wilson in the quarterfinals, which would probably be a bit of a blockbuster tie. But again, in terms of the theories we're talking about, Wilson may be flagging by that stage, whereas Allen is really coming on strong and can find his game as this tournament progresses. So, yeah, he's someone I really like at 20-1. I think that is with AK.
Before we go on to your second pick, Mark Allen, I got to say, he's somebody I actually backed last year, and it was going on a similar kind of logic to yourself, because I do think that it's really interesting when a player really tries to work on themselves and reinvent themselves a little bit. And I think, he's lost a lot of weight, hasn't he? He's really adjusted his lifestyle. You often see him sort of holding a hot drink and keeping his hands warm and all these little kind of things. He's looking for the 1%. And I think he's obviously got stuck in with the sports psychology side of things, which I think is crucial in this kind of test. He's really switched on with what he's trying to do. And I really like that angle when you put it up. And I don't have any doubts that he can go really, really deep. I agree with you that Neil Robertson draw, as much as I like Neil, you can't be afraid to take him on here. No. It could well open up for him. Your second pick at this stage, and as I said, there may be more to come once we know the draw, but at the moment you're advising Ding Junhui at 33-1 available with Midnight. We talked about Xintong as the Chinese potential star, but this man for so long has had the weight of China on his shoulders, hasn't he?
Yeah, and incredible. He's going off, 33-1 with Midnight. We've got going off double the price of Xintong with some firms is incredible. Yeah, similar logic really, where watched Ding a few times this season, and I think there were a few years where he did lose his way and didn't look like the player he was. And I think there were some fair questions about whether he'd ever get back to his very best. But I think there are signs of it this year, if you look for them carefully enough, which we've had to do in terms of value a little bit lower down the market. He won the International Championship in front of his home supporters back in 2024. I think that was in the autumn time. and was absolutely superb all week. One of those players who, when he hits his stride and when he gets going, a bit like what we said about Xintong, but in a different style, can blow you away very quickly. And I think there are some unfair accusations of his kind of mental strength and ability to deal with pressure. I mean, as you said, the guy's got they've had the hopes of China resting on his shoulders for years, and has achieved an awful lot. Won the UK in 2019 and had won it before that as well. Won the Masters, won other big events. This is the one box he hasn't ticked. He's lost the final to Selby in 2016. And yeah, just a player who, again, I sense has a little bit more to give, hasn't peaked yet for this season, got energy in the tank, and I think is playing well enough to go on a really, really good run. Again, in terms of the draw, Luca Bressel in the last 16 is probably a matchup you'd fancy right now from Ding's point of view. And then it is Sean Murphy and Judd Trump who are due to play each other in the last 16, waiting in the quarters. But hopefully, from this perspective, those two have gone the distance in the last 16 and come into the quarterfinal absolutely knackered. So yeah, I like the angle of, as I keep banging on about, these guys who haven't yet peaked for the season, but you feel they've got the caliber, the game, the pedigree to take it to the next level. Rather than the guys who have already peaked for the season and are coming here trying to sort of maintain the highest standard. Sean Murphy, someone like that, who obviously won the Masters, quite fancied this year, but you just sense players like him might have already had their moment for the season.
Yeah, the thing that always makes me laugh with Ding, I talk about the weight of China on his shoulders. I remember some of the viewing figures in China for his finals. I think 210 million watched one of his finals. I always remember the commentator saying it as he was playing a shot, and I thought, good God, the pressure that man is under is unbelievable. But maybe he's just at a nice point of his career now where he's kind of had to deal with all that pressure and spotlight. He's probably delighted to have a few other young Chinese talents taking the limelight off him and just being able to get on with his work. And I've really liked some of the things we've seen from him this season. He's definitely got the temperament for it. And like you say, again, a potentially favourable seed in Bressel first up in round 2. But as I kind of said throughout this video, we are somewhat guessing at the moment. I think about half of the qualifiers have now concluded and half still to come. So by the time me and Adam next chat about this, the draw will be confirmed in full. And hopefully Adam will have had time to bury his head in the markets and unearth us a few match bets and quarter bets, etc. And mark your card ahead of the 17-day marathon at the Crucible. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Adam, pleasure to have you on board. Looking forward to talking more snooker over the next couple of weeks. If you're not already subscribed to us now, please do hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out with growing the channel. Visit oddsnow.com. We've got loads of great daily content going up there for sports betting fans. Please do gamble responsibly, and we'll hopefully see you again very soon. Thanks for watching.